Hello, Light and Geometry students. This video is our second assignment in our algebra review for geometry. In this video, we're going to talk about solving equations. Solving equations is when you have a problem like this. This is not an expression, this is an equation. We know the difference because it has an equal sign in it. In this case, you're going to be asked to figure out what x is that makes this equation true. Okay, basic solving, stuff that you did in algebra right at the beginning of the year. In this case, it says x plus 8 is equal to 11. I want to know what value for x makes this true. To do this, and I know many of you guys are looking at this thinking, I already know the answer, I don't have to do any work. Right, that's because we're starting with a very simple problem. They can get more complicated, so we're going to talk about the process we use, even in the simple problems, so that we can use that process to solve the bigger problems. In this case, we have x plus 8 is equal to 11. We want to get x by itself, and fortunately it has this plus 8 next to it. We have to get rid of that plus 8. We solve problems like this by using opposites. The opposite of adding 8 is subtracting 8. So what I want to do here is I want to subtract 8 from this side of the equation. If I do it to the left side, we have to do it to the right. In this case, x plus 8 minus 8, they cancel out and just become x. On the right side, 11 minus 8 is going to be 3. So we're going to end up with 3 over here and just x on the left. The solution to this problem is x is equal to 3. Now right away you think, that problem's too easy, I did that in my head. But if the problem looked like this instead, you probably could not do this in your head. So that's why we have the steps. In this case, we have x plus 314 is equal to 756. So we're going to do the opposite of adding 314, so we can get x all by itself. For this problem, we're going to subtract 314 from both sides of the equation. On the left side, the 314s cancel out. On the right side, 756 minus 314 is 442. When we're solving equations, we're focused on opposites. In those two problems, something was being added, so we subtracted. In this problem, x is being multiplied by 4. This is 4 times x. So we want to do the opposite of multiply by 4. We are going to divide by 4. So to solve for x in this case, since it's 4 times x, we would divide both sides by 4. On the left, x times 4 and divided by 4 cancel out and just become x. On the right side, 120 divided by 4 is just 30. Now, there's another way to do this problem that will be helpful for people, because in geometry, there's going to be no avoiding this sometimes, which is dealing with fractions. We could take this same problem, and instead of saying divide by 4, we could multiply by 1/4. Multiplying by 1/4 is the same thing as dividing by 4. But in certain cases, it's going to be easier to use fractions. Despite how teenagers tend to feel about fractions, they are sometimes easier. And it's going to be unavoidable in geometry to have to work with fractions. So in this case, 1/4 times 4 times x, the 4's will cancel out. We'll just have x on the left. On the right, 120 times 1/4 is simply going to be 30. You can do that in your calculator. It's particularly easy if you have this black calculator. Here we're going to do 120 times, and we want to do the 1/4. There's a button here, a fraction button right here above the 7. And you type in 1/4, 120 times 1/4 to get that 30. It's actually not that hard. Multiplying by 1/4 is the same as dividing by 4. 120 divided by 4 is going to be 30. You may or may not need the calculator for that, but you may use it. Now again, we're talking about doing opposites. In this case, x is being divided by 5. So x divided by 5 is 7. To solve it, we will do the opposite of dividing by 5, which is multiply both sides by 5. Multiply by 5 on both sides, and we'll end up with x is equal to 35. However, along the lines of fractions being unavoidable in geometry, we would rarely see a problem written this way. Instead, it would say something like this: x over 5 is equal to 7. If x is x on the top or numerator of the fraction, and you have a number in the denominator, we would solve this problem by doing the exact same thing we did on the left here. We're going to multiply by 5. X over 5 is x divided by 5, so we multiply both sides by 5. The problems on the left and the right are the same problem. It's just in geometry, we will usually see the division represented as a fraction. And finally, to do the trifecta of fraction problems, A lot of times we'll see a problem like this in geometry, where we have a fraction being multiplied by our variable that we have to solve. Here we have 3/5 times x is equal to 18. To get rid of this 3/5, we have to multiply it by the reciprocal. See, 3/5 times x, this is saying x times 3 and divided by 5. We want to do the opposite. We want to multiply by 5 and divide by 3. The fastest way to show that is by multiplying by the reciprocal. Times 5 and divided by 5, times 3 and divided by 3, they all cancel out on the left side. On the right side, 18 times 5 over 3, again, you can do this in your is 18 times, and we hit the fraction button here, and it's 5 over 3. You can do the problem this way, but you don't really have to. 18 times 5 over 3 times 5/3 is really times 5 and divided by 3, and you can do them in any order. 18 divided by 3, the number on the bottom, 18 divided by 3 is 6, times 5 is 30. So you can do this problem even without the calculator if you so choose. So here are the most basic problems which we expect you to be able to do. We're going to take a minute and solve for x in each of these. In the first one, x is being multiplied by 4, so you divide. The second one, x, we're subtracting 16, so you'll add. X divided by 8, so you're going to multiply. X plus 28, so you're going to subtract. Take a few minutes and solve these problems. Okay, in the first problem, we're going to divide both sides by 4, and we're going to get x is equal to 30. The second problem, x minus 16 is equal to 17, so we're going to add 16 to both sides, and we'll end up with x is equal to 33. Problem here on the bottom left, this says x divided by 8 is equal to 21, so we multiply both sides by 8, and we'll end up with x equals 168. In the last problem, x plus 28 is 72, so we will subtract 28 from both sides and end up with x is equal to 44. Now those problems are the most basic Algebra 1 problems. We'll deal with more difficult ones now. We're going to talk about two-step equations. Two-step equations are a little trickier, but they are not very difficult. They would tend to look like this. Here we have 3x minus 6 is equal to 9. You know that to get x by itself, you got to get rid of this 3 and this 6. But where people tend to make a mistake is they're not sure which one to start with. If we have to get rid of the 3x and the 6, what do we do first? Well, the way some people think about it is actually thinking about this problem instead. And this is a problem from about 7th grade where you're given an expression, 3x minus 6, and you're told x is 7, and you're asked to just take that number and plug it in. If we do that, we plug 7 in here, and we'll have 3 times 7 minus 6. If you saw this problem, you would hopefully know that you do 3 times 7 first, and then subtract 6 from there. You're following the order of operations. We multiply, and then we add or subtract. When we're solving, we do the opposite. So in this case, if we're trying to get x by itself, we're going to get rid of the addition or subtraction first, then the multiplication or division. So in this case, for this problem, we're going to start off 3x minus 6 equals 9. The first step is to add 6 to both sides. If we do that, then we're going to have 3x is equal to 15. And then we divide both sides by 3. We'll end up with x is equal to 5. Here are two problems for you to try. The problem on the left, 16 equals 2x plus 8. You're going to subtract 8 from both sides and then divide by 2 to find what x is. Now, the second one totally up to you. Take a few moments to try to solve these two equations. Okay, in the first problem, we're going to subtract 8 from both sides, and then we're going to have 8 is equal to 2x, and then the last step, divide by the 2, and we're going to end up with x is equal to 4, or 4 is equal to x. In the second problem, we're going to add 1 to both sides as our first step, and then we're going to have 28 is equal to 4x, and then we divide by 4, and we'll have 7 is equal to x. All right, those are the two-step problems, but they do get more complicated than that. We can start talking about more steps in our problems. Before we do that, though, let's deal with these with fractions. Here we have two-step problems just like the last ones, but now there are fractions in them. To solve these, we still take the same steps. You have to try very hard not to freak out just because there's a fraction in the problem. But if this was just 2x minus 3 equals 5, you'd have no problem solving that. The first step would be to add 3 to both sides. On this case, it's still the same first step. We're going to add 3 to both sides. If we do that, we're now going to have 2/3 x is equal to 8. To get rid of the 2/3, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. We will now multiply both sides by 3 over 2. On the left side, they cancel out. Over here on the right, 8 times 3 over 2, well, it's 8 divided by 2, 4, times 3, 12. We got x is 12. You do the problem on the right. Okay, so for the first step, we're going to subtract 13 from both sides, and now we'll have 15 is equal to 3/5 x. Next, we multiply by the reciprocal, times 5 over 3 for both of these. On the right side, they cancel out. 15 times 5 over 3 is going to give us 25. As our problems get more complicated, it may be useful to keep a list like this one of all the steps that you can take to solve these problems. Here we have the order of operations, which is parentheses, exponents, multiply and divide, add and subtract, which is essentially what we talked about before as simplifying. Parentheses and exponents have no change from when you first learned them, but multiplication and division now includes distribution. And when we talk about adding and subtracting, we're talking about adding and subtracting like terms. We'll simplify with these 4 steps first, and then we take the other 3 steps, which are our solving steps. We move the x's in the equation to one side of the equal sign. Anything that doesn't have an x goes to the other side of the equal sign. And our last step is usually dividing by the coefficient. Now, this doesn't work for every problem, but probably about 95% of the problems you'll run into, this is what we can use to solve. So here's an example of a problem that's going to require several steps. So you can go through this as a checklist. It may be worthwhile to take a screenshot of this, or take a picture, or write it down somewhere so you have it, especially if you struggle with the problems that you're going to see later in this video. So first step, parentheses. We do have parentheses in this problem, the 2x plus 3, but they're not like terms, so we can't add them. There's no exponents in the problem, so we don't have to worry about that step. Now we got multiplication, division. That includes distribution. In this case, we do have distribution. We're going to do 5 times 2x and 5 times 3. So take a second and distribute. And if you do that, we're going to have 10x plus 15 is equal to negative 15. Next, we have addition, subtraction. We're looking for like terms that we can combine. What many people think right off the bat is the 2 15s, oh, those are like terms, they're regular numbers. But like terms have to be on the same side of the equal sign. These are not on the same side of the equal sign. We cannot combine them. So there are no like terms to add. They're on different sides of the equal sign, which is what our solving steps down here will help us to work on. Step 5 here is move our x's to one side. Well, we have 10x here on the left, and there's no x's on the right, so there's nothing to do for that step. But moving our non-x's to the other side, that we're going to have to do. We're going to subtract 15 from both sides. It's just a simple 2-step problem. We're going to subtract 15 from both sides, and then divide by 10, like the last few problems, and we'll end up with x is equal to negative 3. There's another multi-step problem where we can follow these steps. This one you guys should be able to do. There's no parentheses or exponents, and there's nothing to multiply or divide. So all we have is addition and subtraction, and then solving it. Our addition and subtraction here, we should have some like terms to combine. So you're going to combine the like terms, and then try to solve for x. Use scratch paper in your calculator if you need. Try this problem now. Okay, so for the first step in this problem, we're going to identify our like terms. 6x and 3x will give us 9x. So the problem becomes 9x minus 17 is equal to 55. And then the rest of the problem is pretty simple. We're going to add 17 to both sides and divide by 9. We have 9x is 72, and after we divide by 9, we're going to get x is equal to 8. Alright, now we get a more difficult problem that has even more steps. In this problem, in the parentheses, 2x plus 7, they're not like terms, there's nothing we can do. There are no exponents in the problem, so those first 2 steps are done for you. But the next steps, we are going to be able to take. Multiplication, division. We can multiply our special multiplication called distribution. So the first thing you're going to do in this problem is distribute the 3. Do that now. Alright, after we distribute the 3, we're going to have 6x plus 21 plus 6x minus 4 on the right side of the equation. That takes care of our multiplication. Next is going to be combining like terms. You should be able to combine like terms and finish solving this problem. So when we combine our like terms, 6x and 6x will give us 12x. 21 minus 4 will give us 17. So we have 12x plus 17 is equal to 77. And last steps, we're simply going to subtract 17 from both sides, and then divide both sides by 12, and we're going to get x is equal to 5. In each of the problems that we've looked at so far, we've skipped this step, moving our x's to one side. This is what refers to putting our x's together when they're on different sides of the equal sign. In this case, we have a 3x on the left side and a 5x on the right side. They're not like terms because they're on different sides of the equal sign. So we have to put them on the same side of the equal sign. We have 3x on the left. We could subtract that from both sides. Or we have 5x on the right. We could subtract that from both sides to get them together. One of those is a little bit better than the others. You should, whenever you can, move the smaller or lesser of the two x terms. In this case, between 3x and 5x, the 3x is smaller. So that's the one I want to move. I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. If we do that, on the left side they'll cancel out and we'll just have 6. On the right side, 5x minus 3x is 2x, so we have 6 is equal to 2x minus 14. You could have subtracted 5x from both sides, but if you did that, you'd have negative 2x on the left. That's not wrong, but now you have an extra negative sign, and extra negative signs lead to more mistakes. So it's usually better, though not necessary, better to move the smaller or lesser of the two x terms. Now, to finish this problem, you're simply going to add 14 and divide by 2. Find the solution for this equation. We're going to add 14 to both sides, and now we have 20 is equal to 2x, and then divide by 2, and we'll end up with 10 is equal to x. Okay, here's another problem with x on both sides. On the left side, we have 11x. On the right side, we have negative 5x. That negative 5 is much less than the 11x, so we're going to start by moving that. It's minus 5x, so you're going to start by adding 5x to both sides, and then finish solving this problem. So our first step here, we're going to add 5x to both sides. If we do that, we now have 16x minus 2 is equal to 30. Then add 2 to both sides, and we're going to have 16x is equal to 32. Finally, divide by 16, and we'll get x is equal to 2. Okay, this will be our last problem from this assignment, which has almost all these steps incorporated in one question. You're going to try to solve this problem. So you're going to grab yourself a sheet of scratch paper, and we'll go through the steps. In the parentheses here, there's nothing you can add, so there's nothing to do with the parentheses. There is an exponent, 2 to the third. That means 2 times 2 times 2. It's not 6 for those guys who put 6 down. For multiplication and division, you're going to have to distribute the 7 into these parentheses. And then combining like terms, you have 2 terms on the left, and on the right side, after distributing, you'll have 2 terms to combine as well. Once you've done that, it'll look like the previous problems. Take a sheet of scratch paper and a calculator and see if you can solve this equation. Okay, so the first step, since there were no parentheses, is to deal with the exponent. 2 to the third is 8. So I'm going to deal with that 2 to the third and change that to an 8. So on the right side, I have 7 times x plus 1 equals negative 8. There's no exponents on the left, so the left side's not changing. I'm going to leave the left side alone and just simplify the right side. And then we'll go back and deal with the left. Next, on the right side, we have multiplication. We have to distribute the 7. 7 times x and 7 times 1. That'll give us 7x plus 7. Finally, on the right side, we have like terms to combine. 7 minus 8 will give us negative 1. On the left side, the only simplifying we can do is the 8x minus 3x, which will give us 5x. So the left side will become 5x plus 17. After all that, and there's several different orders you could have done that in, and a couple different ways you could write that, but no matter which way you do it, you should eventually end up here. 5x plus 17 is equal to 7x minus 1. Now we're going to get our x's onto the same side by subtracting 5x from both sides. So now we have 17 is equal to 2x minus 1. Then simply add 1 and divide by 2. We end up getting x is equal to 9.